Today we are going to be using the beautiful Morning Flowers layering stamp set and Forest Glades and Arctic pigment inks. These are from the mixed media inks, a panel of orange cardstock, and I'm also going to be using some green and blue crisp dye inks. Let's start by placing our cardstock panel into the stamp positioner. I will arrange the base layer on my cardstock panel now. For this card, I'm not bothering to mask anything. I will just place the flowers and the leaves close together. Just remember to leave your stamps in the stamp positioner till you finish with each layer, because we are going to stamp repeatedly in the same position. So it is really important to leave the existing stamps in the stamp positioner. I'm going to use some white pigment ink now and dab it generously on my base layer because I want a really good thick coverage. I will also repeat this step several times. In fact, I repeated it 3 times each. I'll also press well to make sure that all the ink is transferred to the cardstock panel. I'll move the panel to the other side now and place the leaf. This is useful when you're trying to stamp multiple images. Just make sure that there is no overlap between the layers. In this case, the edge of the flower cluster is overlapping. So what I'm going to do is just grab a piece of acetate which I have on my craft desk, and I'm going to cover the flower with it. Once I've covered the leaf images with the white pigment ink, I will simply remove the acetate. I'll stamp the leaf images 3 times as well. It is also a good idea to dry between layers so that you get a better coverage. Once I'm happy with the amount of white pigment ink that I've got on my card base, I will remove the card panel and dry it thoroughly with my heat gun. Now that we've finished stamping with the white pigment ink and our ink is dry, I'm going to take Arctic, which is the lightest blue color in the mixed media inks, and I'm going to stamp the flowers with this because I want a light tint of blue to the base coat. If you don't have the mixed media inks, you can also do this with your regular dye inks. I just used mixed media inks because they are opaque and I really wanted that extra coverage. I will stamp this twice because I wanted a slightly darker shade of tint than what I got with the first stamping. For the leaves, I will use the Forest Glades ink and again stamp twice. Let's move on to the second layer now. I'm going to use dye inks for the stamping. For the leaves, I'm going to be using the evergreen dye ink. This is a darker ink, so I'll be stamping it only once. For the flowers, I'm using Persian blue and I'm going to stamp this twice. Do test your inks before you do the stamping on dark cardstock because the white pigment ink tends to lighten the dye inks and you will not get the same shade as you would get when stamping on white paper. I decided to use heat embossing for my final layer. So I'm prepping the cardstock with a little bit of talcum powder. I simply use a large makeup brush to apply it on the paper. Instead of using embossing ink, I'm going to use the pigment inks. These stay wet longer and can be used for heat embossing. Just remember to work a little bit faster than you would with your normal embossing inks. After I've finished stamping with evergreen mixed media ink, I will simply move the panel to the other side of the stamp positioner and use the sapphire mixed media pigment ink to stamp the flowers. I'll simply cover the panel with clear embossing powder now. I finished heat setting it and now you can see the beautiful shine which the embossing powder is giving my panel. With this, a basic stamping on dark cardstock is done. To assemble the card, I use the sentiment die from the Calming Cluster die set. I've also trimmed my panel on the sides so it will fit over a A2 sized card base and leave a nice little border around it. I've die cut the sentiment out of a dark blue strip of paper and I'll just glue a smaller stick of orange behind the sentiment panel because I want to pop it up with some foam tape. I'm going to use the Altenew Instant Dimension foam tape for my sentiment panel. First, I will just stick the ready panel with some liquid glue to my card base. I'll also stick the scrap of orange paper behind my sentiment die cut and allow it to dry a little bit. Now our card is almost finished. The only thing missing is the flower centers. The Morning Flowers stamp set has separate stamps to create the flower centers, but I decided to use some half pearls in white to finish them and stick my pearls.